The planets have aligned, and once again, the prophecy has come true. That's right, folks. It's time for another episode of the Round Table Rethink podcast with me, your host, Uncle Paddy, joined every week by twin brother and spare parts bin, Andy the Asshole. Woo! And of course, ordinarily, we'd be joined by bestie, Stevie Tel Avivi. However, unfortunately this week, Stevie Tel Avivi is in London enjoying some well-deserved family time. But who else could we bring in to take on the mantle of shamelessly begging for likes and subscribes and reviews? Andy, why don't you explain our bestie guestie stand-in for this week?
Who better to join us, to parachute into the hot seat as our very first guest entrepreneur than my mate and my old mentor, Brian Maguire, a.k.a. Specs Jesus, a.k.a. the great and powerful Mogwai, a.k.a.
That's a Gremlins reference for anybody who's unclear.
For children who came up in the 80s with the Gremlins movies, my phonic riddle has already been solved. But in all seriousness, Brian has a storied career in entrepreneurship. First time around, he founded and scaled Vision Call to an 8-figure business before selling that, and then came back again to have another run at optometry, innovating on the way that people buy eyewear with his latest business, Iola, growing like a weed, as you would expect, nothing less. But the jewel atop his crown of business accomplishments by far is as my old mentor, way back when we were both involved in Scotland's very first business startup accelerator, Entrepreneurial Spark. And we're going to talk a wee bit more about that later. So, Brian, thank you so much for joining us. We are so happy to have you on the show.
It's fantastic to be here. I've really enjoyed the podcast so far. I'm tuned into every version, told everyone I know all about it.
Brilliant.
I'm honoured to be the inaugural guest.
And we're honoured to have you.
And he loves that introduction so much that he's going to have Andy follow him in a van everywhere he goes and introduce him as he walks into bars and restaurants.
I think he used AI for that, though, to be fair.
As he's Don King hype man.
So, what was on the docket for this week? So this week, we'll be talking about JD Vance and how he managed to piss everyone off at the European AI Safety Summit. We'll be talking Grok 3, which actually launches at 8 p.m. Pacific time this evening. So it's actually going to launch 2 or 3 hours after we've finished recording the podcast. So we'll make some predictions about what's coming in Grok 3. And then Brian is going to talk to us about AI and its practical implementation for startups. So many use cases now developing for how startups can just transform, get to product market fit faster, accelerate sales and market, and accelerate time to value using these incredible new tool sets. And we're going to unpack all of that in the coming hour.
You're goddamn right we are.
So I think a good place to start is actually on the JD stuff. So I think we always try and align the podcast and the content with what's been happening in the news on any given week. It's been hard to avoid JD's contribution to the AI Safety Summit this week.
Very
it
controversial.
Seems to have been everywhere. I will be honest with you, I was absolutely thrilled and elated by his speech. And I will tell you that I think if you've been listening to the podcast since the very beginning, I think you'll have positioned Uncle Paddy as the anti-Europe, sort of very negative on Europe and our ability to get things done.
And Starmer and the UK and the fact we can't get anything done anywhere.
Yeah, thank you. And I don't know if it's an unwarranted position, and I'll expand on that in just a minute, but I think JD's speech was an absolute wake-up call. It was a total reality check for Europe in its attitude to AI. So what I want to do is just walk people through high level the talking points that he made, maybe just unpack each of them as we go through, and then talk about what some of the reaction has been since. So I'll set the scene. It was the AI Safety Summit in Paris. It was hosted by President Macron and also co-hosted by Prime Minister Modi of India.
Yeah.
And so the idea behind this was to get a whole bunch of world leaders in a room and then do what Europe does best. Talk about things they're concerned about and things that need to be controlled and regulated. And I think everybody should have a healthy level of skepticism when one speaker after another gets up on stage and talks about safety and control and security and protection and all these very scary sounding words. And so honestly, I thought the contributions of the first 4 or 5 speakers, who were all European bureaucrats, was totally fucking depressing.
Yeah.
Like absolutely depressing. It was the most depressing, fearful vision of what AI could be in the future. And there was absolutely no mention of the opportunity. It was just like, how do we control the risk? How do we snuff this thing out before it even, comes into being, or before we even know what it is and what it's capable of? How do we stifle it with over-regulation?
Safety protocols and regulations.
Safety and give it its own European personality, whatever that means, For me, that's like code for, coding in bias and coding in protection and coding in speech and what people can and can't say. So anyhow, it was all pretty depressing stuff. So then JD goes up on stage and he's opening line, and I love this. He got up and he went, guys, I'm not here to talk about AI safety. I'm here to talk about AI opportunity. And I was like, thank you. I'm sad enough where I'm actually one of the few people in the world that watched the 2.5 hour long AI
full conference.
So it was like a breath of fresh air. And so at the very high level, he positioned AI as an opportunity. And so the first thing he did was he talked about how it's got the potential to spur economic growth, to strengthen national security, to boost healthcare, promote innovation. And he urged people to stop thinking overcautiously about AI and start getting excited about what can be done. And so if you think about it, things like the invention of electricity, right? There was obviously inherent risks with that, but instead of focusing on that, we focused on the opportunity of what could be done using that technology. And that led to the modern world and all the comfort and convenience that we enjoy. It led to the light bulb, the electric motor, and pretty much everything that powers this podcast, right? But it's also what you can plug John Coffey into and blow his fucking head off. So
in the Green Mile.
And the government's so relaxed about electricity now, they bring a feed of it into your front door and then they let monkeys like me take a spur off it and add another socket, and they don't get involved and they don't worry about that, and they know I could blow up myself, but we've got past the point where we're worried about that as a technology, and we've gave it back to people to we gave people agency over the risk. We've basically said, right, we trust that you don't want to blow up yourself and your family and burn your house down, so we are going to let you take a socket out to your shed.
As the big differentiator, not the government doesn't mind you blowing yourself to kingdom come, but we don't want something that can blow everybody to kingdom come.
Yeah, but where's the evidence that AI is going to blow everybody to kingdom come? If we'd had that approach, then we'd never have had the nuclear, we'd never have split the atom, right? And that quite nicely ties back into JD's speech. So I think his speech concludes with the fact that France, who held the conference, supported the Marquis de Lafayette, supported the American Revolution, and he broke the oppression there with a sword. And he used that metaphor to say that the sword was a symbol for liberating hundreds of thousands of people or millions of people at that time, but it's just as easily an instrument for oppressing people. And so we choose to do good with that. And so if you go back to the nuclear analogy, and we split the atom, and that's great. It could provide clean, abundant energy for a small city for all time, or it could blow up a city with a couple of million people in it. We choose not to blow up the city, right? Or at least we have done so far.
Yeah.
So he was painting a very positive, opportunistic future for AI. Ursula von der Leyen, who's the president of the European Commission, she got up and it was quite a chilling speech. I thought in parts she was saying the right thing, but then she kept coming back to this thing that we'll be the first country in the world or the first continent in the world to build trustworthy AI.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh God, what does that mean? You know, like what's trustworthy AI? So again, when people are asking you to throw your lot in with them because they're the trustworthy ones and they're the ones who are, it's like, oh God.
I think Elon's approach to training Grok, which is maximally truth-seeking and maximally curious.
Yeah.
That does seem like a good approach to get something that's safe, because if it's curious, then we are one of the most wondrous things in the universe, and you think it would want to foster humanity and nurture it. And if it's maximally truth-seeking, because you've seen what happens when you go off the beaten track on truth-seeking.
You get Black George Washington
You
and
get
female
Gemini.
Jesus.
You get Gemini producing female Jesus and Black George Washington. And unfortunately, when you pull on that thread, it can actually take you to a really bad place.
Exactly. So I feel like she's saying the right thing. She's saying that there's a $200 billion investment, which is the biggest investment in the world in trustworthy AI. Using that phrase specifically because the $500 billion investment in Stargate, which dwarfs our $200 billion investment, the implication there is that's untrustworthy AI.
Yeah.
And so Europe is building trustworthy AI. Listen, she's talking about scrapping regulations and making things go faster and injecting capital.
Talk is cheap.
It's a lot of words. I think we have to see if the action actually shows up on the back of it. Sundar Pichai, who's the CEO of Google, gave a really interesting... he told a really interesting story on the stage. He felt that we needed to be bold and not be fearful as it related to AI. And he used AlphaFold as an example for that. So AlphaFold is Google DeepMind's protein folding algorithm, research algorithm. And so he actually spat out a stat that I did not know. So he said it would normally take one person their entire PhD to unlock one protein. And AlphaGo, within 3 months, unlocked 200 million proteins.
Yeah.
And created an open database that's being used by every research organization in the world.
I suppose the question for me there is, as you fear the impact on jobs or businesses, who does that benefit?
Yeah.
The advancement in medicine and bespoke medicines for people and actually improving quality of life is what you need to focus down on the opportunity.
100%. Yeah.
Not the risk.
Well, I mean, the one thing I would say is I think everybody can sense that we're hurtling towards something here potentially a wee bit too quickly, and that there's so much frenetic competition, not just between companies, but between countries and continents to get there first.
Yeah.
The penalty for pumping the brakes to try and introduce more safety protocols and more regulations means you potentially go from first in the race to 74th in the race in a very short period of time. So there's so much momentum built up behind it. I don't think anybody can pump the brakes at this point, even if they wanted
so
to.
much inertia.
And be seen as still be seen as a key player in the whole thing, you know?
A well-meaning amateur here, but if you over-regulate, I mean, people will just go to different countries. Look how quickly people adopted DeepSeek because it was free or better. If you over-regulate it and constrain it,
it's still above Apple in the App Store, by the way, for downloads. It's still above ChatGPT in the Apple Store for downloads, DeepSeek. And it came out of nowhere.
There's already been a meaningful brain drain from Europe to America for AI talent and engineering talent. That was true back in Silicon Valley days. I mean, most of Silicon Valley was staffed by young Asian kids, you know, so it's not necessarily Native Americans that built Silicon Valley. It was actually a melting pot for the talent around the world, and they attracted them to that place. The reason why every country and every company in the world is emptying the piggy bank on this stuff is because the prize that's up for grabs is not the future of social media or the future of search. It's the future of the entire fucking economy in its entirety.
Yeah.
That's why everybody is emptying the bank. That's why the competition's so violent. And it's honestly, for me, it's just like, this is what happens in a free market. When everybody moves out the way and all the capital moves in and all the best companies in the world get to cooking, you get this phenomenal acceleration in capability.
So what do you make of the argument then that, so one of the things that came out of Vance's speech was that America are going to throttle adversaries in air quotes ability to access semiconductors and silicon. So who are the adversaries and where does that leave them at that point?
They're not going to, well, we know who the adversaries are. The adversaries are China, and that
Maybe Europe.
And this is not a future state, Andy. This is already happening.
Yeah.
They have been denying China the most advanced technology. But listen, if you think China's not working around about that, then you don't know anything.
Yeah.
China's getting its hands on that. There's shell companies based in Hong Kong,
Singapore
that are routing all this material through. So for me, it's like finger in the dike stuff. It's still getting through to the places where it needs to go. And necessity is the mother of invention. All you're doing is forcing the Chinese to build their version of the NVIDIA chip. And when enough time passes, believe me, they will do that.
Because they're the world's best photocopier.
And NVIDIA definitely has a technical lead here. But anytime you've got a margin that big, it's going to come under attack from everybody.
Yeah.
So somebody else will crack the silicon side of this. And so NVIDIA does have a moat, and it will have a moat for a while, but it's not an indefinite moat. And there will be competitors in the space, and they'll most likely come out of China.
And what did you make I don't know if I'm stealing your thunder here, but what did you make of Vance's commentary on the job? So it's not going to be a job destruction tool, it's going to be a job creation tool. Because we have had kind of conflicting viewpoints on that for a while now, haven't we?
I know. And, you know, he had a compelling thing to say about that. And then the All In podcast had something very compelling to say about that. And I think I moved in that direction. I think I've moved from a position where it's very dystopic and there's hundreds of thousands of people or millions of people out of work with nothing to do. I think fundamentally the jobs will be different, but there will be jobs. The positive version of this is this accelerates growth and GDP and all that stuff so much that it just becomes a world of abundance and everybody gets to participate.
There's so much abundance, but then it'll be for governments to decide how that gets distributed if there are sufficiently high numbers of people that just can't access, you know, these types of job opportunities.
So here's who I don't think we can help. If you are just hell-bent on being left behind by this trend and you make no effort to understand the tool set, you make no effort to understand the technology, you don't invest any time or energy into figuring out how to use this stuff, then for sure you will be outcompeted by somebody who does. And I don't know if we can help those people.
I think you need to grab the PR on the positive, because I think the Doom Brigade got it first.
Yeah.
I wouldn't call Mo Gaudet necessarily the Doom Brigade, but I think everybody probably has listened to that podcast with Stephen Bartlett when he, and obviously he was the chief business officer at Google X and was painting a rather dark picture. Yeah. And I think that was brought to life with one of the most stunning pieces of podcast I'd ever listened to. And he'd lost his son. Tragically, he'd lost his son Ali to an operation, young boy. And he was talking about the reluctance to bring children into this world. Yeah. And Bartlett turned around to him and said,
What are you talking about?
Would you bring your child back? Yeah. Now? No.
Really?
Wow.
And
no.
And it's because of his view of how difficult the world is. Yeah. Now, I think there you've got two choices. Yeah. You can bury yourself away or grab this and make some kind of future for yourself. That's quite a dark moment. Yeah. But I think that caught the imagination of a lot of people and a lot of the negativity around this, which is only understandable. Yeah. But in the contrary to that, we've got to use it for an advantage.
Yeah. I think there's parts of society you definitely have to feel sorry for. If you've got parents who are still trying to get to grips with their iPhone, or grandparents, if you're showing your
Or if you get my dad stabbing away at the remote control trying to get Landman episode 5 to come on.
I know. Lamenting the 4 buttons on the
telly.
front of the thing.
I know, we're talking about generative AI. They're like, oh, fuck, I only just got used to the iPhone. I need to figure out generative AI.
My dad's heartbroken that they can't get teletext back.
Anyhow, I'll speed us through the rest of the points here because I'm conscious that we've got a lot to cover. So, you talked about America's leadership, them wanting to be the gold standard for AI development and AI and be the partner of choice for other countries around the world. Fine, okay. That's the very America first Trump mindset. And, I think it's fair enough. I wish we had a wee bit more of Britain first mindset here, but we don't. And so they're going to very much throw the kitchen sink at this and make sure that the best AI technology, the best infrastructure and the best models are fundamentally built and developed in the US. He's also talking about semiconductors. That might be a stretch. I think for a while to come, the world's ships will still be built in Taiwan from TSMC.
But TSMC have open foundries in America, right?
That's true. They've opened a couple of big facilities in Arizona, but they're probably a year or two away from having any meaningful volume production yield that could be deployed in a production setting. But it is a trend. He then went on to talk about cautioning them against over-regulation. He pointed to examples of where that's happened, like the EU's Digital Services Act and our old friend GDPR. Okay, for our American friends listening, what you don't have to do is every time you go onto a website, there's a little fucking box that pops up and asks you to agree to the privacy policy of that website before you're allowed to use it. And we have to click agree. And 999
people out of 1,000
click that little box. And so we've optimized for the 1% or the half of 1% who have an issue with that. And so that's an example of regulation
gone mad.
That's massively burdensome. Gets more serious the bigger you get, because the fines for being non-compliant with GDPR are percentage values of your entire revenue.
Which is insane.
So not so much a problem if you're a couple $100,000 business, but a massive problem if you're a $200 million business. You have to take that stuff very seriously. And it seeps into every conversation you have inside the company. I know that. I've just came from working from a very large business. Compliance, security, regulation are on their mind at all times, and it seeps into things that are not even obvious that it would seep into. So he used that as an example of over-regulation. He talked about concern about ideological bias. That covers Black George Washington and female Jesus.
Unlike Specs Jesus. But
and this idea that you should just let the facts be the facts. Let the facts be the facts. Let's not rewrite history. Let's not recreate a narrative around about people that we used to consider heroes who are now enemies through a new lens.
Yeah.
Just let history be history and let the facts be the facts, and don't inject too much bias into the algorithms, which I think is a fine point. He did focus on workers. His view was certainly that it's not going to replace a whole bunch of workers. It's going to create an abundance of opportunity for workers to leverage. And then wrapping up here, he talked about building out AI infrastructure, and that actually power was going to be the number one constraint,
not compute. Yeah.
And so if we go back to Europe, not to do too much Europe bashing, but if you think about Europe's
deindustrialization.
Yeah. So its biggest economy, Germany, has effectively committed financial harry-carry by spending the last decade shutting down all its nuclear energy facilities in order to import 68% of its power, at the same time having to move, because of a net zero commitment, to a carbon-free economy, while its most important industry, the car industry, is trying to move from combustion engines to electric vehicles and failing spectacularly just at the moment where we have less energy than ever before that's domestically produced, and it's more expensive than it's ever been before. So Germany having the third highest energy prices in the whole of Europe, only behind Ireland and Italy.
And look at the deindustrialization that's happening in the UK. Just the other day, they banned fracking. Miliband banned fracking across the entire UK, leaving all that gas in the ground. And then very recently, the Starmer government banned all new drilling licenses and exploration licenses in the North Sea. We're trying to make this jump to renewables too quickly, when actually what we need is a more steady transition to renewables with cheap, abundant power, which we have, but we're not prepared to tap into, all at the altar of net zero.
Yeah.
I tried. I have successfully got support from government agencies to support innovation in the past, and I can't be too negative about that. But recently, Scottish Enterprise have moved to a position where if you do not have a net zero strategy, you're not going to get support.
Really?
I mean, it's absolutely incredible to think of a company of our size, how you could achieve net zero realistically.
Yeah.
You're taking raw materials across continents on ships. And the carbon footprint might be quite small for a pair of glasses, of course, very vital medical device. But just to be able to consider a net zero strategy, at the end of the day, you're going to get so far, you have to pay somebody to plant a tree somewhere. Yeah. And that's just paying lip service to the concept.
100%.
And even in our industry, the guys that are doing that are just guessing. They're working out the mileage of a band getting from Essex to somewhere. They're saying, well, there's a van or a couple of vehicles and it's roughly this mileage. And so we'll go into this online service and we'll
CO2
spend
calculators,
17 quid planting X amount of trees. It's just...
Listen, it's garbage. And the truth
it's
is...
all virtue signalling.
The dirty secret is everybody involved in it. No, there's no ability to deliver on net zero.
No.
But we're all linked arms and we're stumbling down the road together anyway.
Yeah.
And that's the crime of the whole thing. The economies of Europe have been sacrificed at the altar of net zero, despite the fact that China and India, unless they engage in a meaningful way, there's nothing the Western world can do that would.
And
move the
America are
needle
going
on
back to
anything.
drill, baby, drill. So they're
And
joining
America
that club
going
as
back
well.
the way they're scrapping any kind of. They're coming out of the Paris Agreement. They're drill, baby, drill. They're firing up LNG plants everywhere. So it's very difficult. And by the way, I think the important thing for everybody to realize is these conversations are nuanced. It's not because I've got disdain and, a bit of enmity towards net zero that I'm not also for the planet.
Yeah.
But you mentioned...
And doing the right thing. But you've got to be able to balance these things in a way that's practical.
You talked about nuclear. Is it not inconceivable to have a ship that is taking material across continents to be powered by the same nuclear engine that is in a submarine?
That's in the USS George Washington.
Or in an aircraft
Completely
carrier.
zero. And there is a global strategy that could make a huge difference.
Yeah.
Not sticking plastic bottles into the recycling.
And I think
bin.
that's a
Small
very...
modular nuclear reactors are 100% a part of the answer here. And the good news is they're only about 48 months away. Well, 36 months away, I think, from being a practical reality to be able to deploy them in a production setting. You've got to get through the NIMBY stuff. You've got to get through all that. But from a technological thing that can be deployed, they're getting very close now. They could be a huge part of the answer to this whole thing.
But I think just taking the climate stuff out, I think we can all agree there's none of us are ideologues here, right? I would love it if we could all move to kind of net zero, cheap, abundant, fuel production tomorrow. But the bottom line is what we all understand as business people is that your economy sits on top of a foundation of power that fundamentally underwrites your entire economy. And if you don't have, if that foundation of power is expensive, then your economy is uncompetitive. It's as simple as that.
Your economy is driven by making the solution.
Yeah.
Whether that's a wind farm or a small nuclear reactor, you create these new jobs, these new innovations and new
100%.
economies to solve the problem.
Yeah.
If you can hook it up. Now, those planets were not aligned in Germany. The
planets are not aligned and the prophecy has not come true.
The opposite of the ducks lining up there.
That's right, folks. It's not time for cheap, abundant power in Germany.
So here's my conclusion on the whole thing. Europe's become a third-rate power. It's become a third-rate power economically, politically, militarily. However, I don't have no hope for Europe. I think Europe have the people, they've got the talent, they've got the infrastructure, they've got the capital to turn it round about. What they don't have right now is political will. By the way, I think the peoples of Europe are really starting to wake up to this. Yeah. I believe the people are on board. I think the political institutions will get there eventually, but I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon.
I heard it put perfectly the other day, which is America's still the country to make your money and Europe's still the continent to spend your money.
Yeah.
And I think that's just probably... So I shan't try and improve on that. It's a good one.
So if you want to finish on analogies, I was reading something by David Hannemer Hansen. He's the creator of the Ruby on Rails framework, a super interesting guy, very, very smart mind on all this stuff. And he called it Europe's impotent rage. They're, they're angry, but they can't do anything. Like, what are they going to do? Like they're raging and they're toothless.
Tiger.
They're the toothless tiger. So that was pretty much it. They've got a lot of repressive anger, but they can turn it round about. It's just going to take some political will to get it done. All right, that's enough Euro bashing. Andy, what have you got for us?
Well, it's Brian, isn't it?
All right.
So I think to frame this conversation, and I'll just spend 60 seconds doing that before I hand it over, Brian. So looking at the listeners of this podcast, there's a lot of executives, there's a lot of business owners. Most of them understand the importance of AI. and it's something that they need to get to grips with. But what's also clear is that precious few of them are doing anything meaningful with AI. So, but not from an awareness perspective. It's more from a practical application perspective. They don't know what to do first. They don't know where to start. So that's why I was really, really pumped this week when you came up with the idea of talking about the practical applications of AI, particularly as it pertains to startup businesses. So with that, I'll hand it across to you.
Yeah, great. I think AI is a game changer for startups and innovation. So let's frame it around innovation, because if there's people who are sitting today listening who've got existing businesses, then we're talking about that as well. So we're talking about bringing new products, new services to market, whether that's a startup or whatever. And it's a game changer, and I'm seeing it play right before my very eyes. So if I think of the different phases of businesses I've been around, and you as well, guys starting your own businesses. If you think of the 90s, software being coded, we had Vision Call had a refrigerated server room with a guy who seemed to be constantly in
with his arse hanging out
this cabinet, right, covered in wires. I mean, mental. And then we go forward to, Iola and seeing Stefan in a corner using software as a service and bolting this tech stack together and creating this omni-channel platform. It was phenomenal. We can go to market straight away. He could spend time designing frames and eyewear and real value add stuff. And Shopify and these kind of plugins. But now I'm seeing right before my very eyes, on my dining room table, here's my 22-year-old son starting up his business with his pals straight out of uni. His pals away over in Northern Ireland. And he's sitting with AI right beside him. It's not an AI business. It will have an AI element in it. But he's using it as a research tool. It's something that can help and accelerate him. I'm watching that and I'm thinking, there's something in this. Definitely something in this. So I caught that video by Sam Altman. I mean, you might have seen it.
Yeah, Sam Altman.
So it was about a year ago, and he went on stage and he built a live chat in 4 minutes to replicate what we used to do in Entrepreneurial Spark. And he basically built this chat that could interrogate startups on their idea. A sort of Jim Duffy, a digital version of that, if you will, right? And it's sitting up there, and he said that this is what we used to do in Y Combinator, just challenge people's ideas. And he built this chat live. And I'm watching this, and I'm thinking, that's absolutely incredible. So inspired by all that, I thought, I'll create a virtual startup this weekend. I'll just give it a go, pure straight out of the old kind of Babson eSpark playbook. So I go, right, okay, so how would I do that normally? So I'm in my own domain, so, optometry and eyewear and all these different areas. And I'm thinking, right, that's my area of expertise. So what's that kind of pain point that I think exists? And we're talking about efficiencies, customer service within sort of optical professions, whatever that is. And that's that whole opportunity recognition piece. So at all times, the only tool I'm using is ChatGPT. It's the only tool I'm using. I'm not doing anything. I'm not coming out. I'm not going to Google. I'm just building it into a project, just in basic 4.0. So I've got this pain point, and I start popping it in, and it's grilling me back. It's asking me questions. It's validating. So the analog version of that in Entrepreneurial Spark would have been, I would have came to you with my business idea. You and Jim Duffy would have been sitting in an office. I would have come in and presented it. Me being the startup business, you being the experienced entrepreneur. So, I'd say, are you sure? Yeah. Is that a problem? So I can. Is that really unique part of your service, or is it actually commoditized 100%. And you've just, So it's coming back and saying, great idea. It's a £130 billion market. There'll be huge inefficiencies in this market, huge opportunities. Here's a place to play. I'm like, that's incredible. So building this whole sort of a beginning point of a pain point. So you've essentially created the digital version of a super smart adversarial ideator to help you flesh out this idea. Absolutely. So then we start creating potential solutions. What could we do? And absolutely looking at a value proposition, building some kind of solution for this. And it's coming back, great. You're on the right track here. That could really work. That absolute, taking that value proposition to a market, looking at testing and assumptions. And here's the key, not a bit of emotion, not a cognitive dissonance, not a bias, any of that. Nothing in play, no just emotions, coldly no looking at the idea. Just coldly looking at it, coming back with other suggestions. The feasibility was the next stage. I'm like, right, can this be built? And I was quite cognizant of Steve's point when he was talking about his old business. The tech wasn't there to support that business, but it is now. And it's saying, oh, yeah, you could build a solution. It's coming back with ideas of how we could use AI to actually solve the problem. So AI is telling me how it would solve that problem, how it would build that. Now, that's interesting because it's coming back with ideas that I haven't thought of. Technology I don't even know exists. I mean, I'm an optometrist.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about tech. And it's coming back with a tech stack, things I could bolt together. Then I'm going, okay, what's my next phase? Viability. How much is this going to cost? If we were to do this today, how much would it cost? Guess how much it will cost to host it? I reckon this is the development time. I think we could get this up and running. I could build it for you. Would you like me to build it for you now? So, my goodness me, this is incredible. So I took all of that, right, as just a concept, just on these pages. And I sent a WhatsApp to one of my friends who runs 14 optical practices. And I said, what are your top 5 problems that you're experiencing right now in your business? Unprompted, no reason. I get back 5, I copy and paste it, I pop it back into chat, and I say, this is one of my potential clients, fictitiously. How well aligned is our value proposition to actually tackle his pain points? You're right on track. Here's exactly how this is going to fix this guy's problem.
And these were unsolicited questions, right? You want to lead in the witness, or you want to try to game the system?
It could quite easily come back and say, you're way off.
Yeah.
But it actually come back and said, you're absolutely on the money. And here is the ROI that guy is likely to experience. Would you like me to create a pitch deck for him? And we could ping that to him now and see if we can get him as a client. I'm like, I don't have a business here. Right, stop. Yeah. Put the brakes on this. And I'm thinking, comes back with routes to market, collaborations, concepts, who's your customer's customer. Here's other ways that you could build this.
Yeah.
And literally in a weekend, you're sitting there with this potential business opportunity. You can either take or do whatever you like with it. And I suppose we're still into the concept of where I saw intelligence, our human intelligence, was where to probe, the question to ask.
Yeah.
So had it been next to us, Andy, many, many years ago in eSpark, we could have used that live.
Yeah.
We could have actually said, well, let's see if that's a big market. Pop it in, see what's coming back. So you've still got the prompts, you've still got the questions to ask it. So there's still an element there of problem solving and really strategic thinking. But the amount of information that was coming back, super fast, super quick, and very high quality was quite incredible.
I'll give you an anecdote. So Brian and I both obviously did the entrepreneurial Spark experience, but from completely different vantage points. We were I was the broke startup entrepreneur. I'd been in business for a couple of years, just trying to get onto my feet, kind of doing some revenue, but kind of getting nowhere fast. You were the experienced entrepreneur. But I remember one of the things that you really had to focus on as part of your 6 to 12 month journey through eSpark was this 60-second pitch. So the whole thing is you're in an elevator, the doors close, you're going to fucking floor 14, try saying that 3 times fast after a couple of Jack Daniels. You've got 60 seconds to get there, and the second the door shuts, somebody says, what is it you do?
Yeah.
And you had to encapsulate perfectly exactly what you did, what was so amazing about it, and, blah, 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 whatever. So that entire process, so what you had to do is you had a framework that you had to work within on paper. You had to take that away to your desk, sit down in a dark room, write out for hours, just go over it for hours, write out your best go at a 60-second pitch, and then you would take it on a Monday night to your mixture of experts, which was basically Brian or Jim in a room along with your 30 peers, the other entrepreneurs that were going through the program at the time. And you would say your 60-second pitch, they would interrogate it, they would give you feedback, and then you would go away and you'd refine it the next week, and you'd do that over and over and over again. And that whole process, just to get a tight 60-second pitch, would take 8 to 12 weeks of the program.
And that,
how long would it take you to do that now?
I did it in a nanosecond. And I think it wasn't, when you talked about the elevator pitch, it was more about you being able to distill down what you were about in your proposition. And if you're sitting listening, try it yourself. You've been in business for 32 years, give it a go. Because it's actually really difficult.
Bloody hard.
But that's what customers want to hear. They want to hear what you can do for them and how your solution fixes their problem. But I think if you take that back to what we can do with this, the impact of this. If this is within businesses, this is deep within startups, within innovation pipelines, within business, it can really accelerate back to that opportunity piece. Speed and impact, you mentioned it, failing fast and learning and adapting and iterating. Well, there it was right there, live. So speed is everything. And I start that we picked up at the weekend. There was an article in the Telegraph. It was PwC had done some research, and they'd analysed startups which are now sitting at 40% of insolvencies in 2024, which is down from 60 10 years ago, and they're accrediting most of that to AI.
Wow.
So startups are using AI to reduce waste, to reduce cost, actually with some consequences to jobs.
Mm-hmm. And to get started for less money.
To get started for less money, you're not going to, your runway's longer, you've got more chance of hitting the road, more ultimate better economy. You've got a better startup rate, you've got a better economy generally. And if you flip that into some of the sort of slightly negative side of that conference, for example, in Europe, if you think about us, I don't think we're going to own AI, but I think we can use it as the building blocks of entrepreneurship. You don't need to create the hammer to build the house. It's a concept. And I've already started to think and network and ping ideas to maybe a cohort of the alumni of eSpark and said, look, I don't know where you got to, but you could revisit some of your thoughts, some of your ideas, your industries with this technology.
Using this framework.
You could get another accelerant out there to fuel, economic growth.
And just to be clear, the only tool you used for all of this was the 20 quid a month version of ChatGPT.
To be honest, if I had more patience, I could.
You could have done it on the free version.
I could have got it free. I'd probably ran out of tokens, or
Or
whatever.
you could have done it on Perplexity or DeepSeek or something like that.
So Brian, you've done the very expensive Babson College version of this, right? Where you went to America and you learned how to take companies through that ideation process. For whoever was on the hook paying for that, I'm sure that cost a lot of money. I'm sure you went on very nice flights. The lie flat bed.
There was no hospitality.
Don't worry, I don't think anybody from Scottish Enterprises
No
definitely
frills.
didn't go to the Joe Pianos in Boston that day, definitely.
Don't worry, Scottish Enterprise on it listening.
It just, as you were telling the story, it just dawned on me what the implications for education are, because if you had to spend a bunch of money in the past to go and learn this stuff, and now you can put the same thing together, delivering a similar level of quality on a weekend. It for me, in the future, maybe not in the immediate future, but in the medium to long-term future, it calls into question learning courses and any framework or course that can be codified and then played back.
Yeah, across multiple areas. I think the speed and impact was one thing. I think Andy alluded to it. No disrespect to Brian and Jim, but the people in Ayrshire, their limitation was the quality of entrepreneur that they got to either mentor them or enable them.
Yeah.
And it's okay, thank you. It's very, very positive to say that, we were doing okay, but I was like half a rung above you in time, in business. And so we go to Mass Challenge, right, in America with Jim, and loads of accelerators. And I remember going around the tables talking to somebody, these startups, and they were all buzzing and all getting multi-million-pound investments. And this girl had a great idea in the travel space. And I said to her, great, where did you get the idea? She said, my dad, he founded TripAdvisor. And I'm like, what kind of mentoring did she get compared to what we could offer?
Yeah.
So this opens the global world of information and innovation with this language model that allows you to be able to do this research and get perhaps just as much an opportunity to get that quality in Ayrshire as you did in Boston.
Or San Francisco or
France.
Yeah.
So, you come back to your European opportunity. It's right there.
And then the crazy part of me is without any further effort or energy expended by you, as the models get better and new models come through, it will just get better on its own at what you've originally programmed it to do, just by the models getting better. So you can almost ride this wave where you've taken the experience and your understanding of what you learned at Babson, to write the right prompts and get the right
Yeah.
outputs, understanding their prompts will get even better.
Yeah.
So the quality of the
Compounding
ideation
the
will get
learning.
better over time as the models get better, and you'll get all that for free.
So I think, you know, I've always been a kind of half full kind of outlook. You have to be. There's just no alternative.
Absolutely.
And I think my big bet for the 25, that's a good one for your guest. You can say what's the next 12 months going to look like. But I do foresee a plethora of startups hyper-focused on a pain solution. I think you'll see really successful startups popping up across the world, literally unicorns, and from their dining table.
Yeah.
I think there'll be very small teams, really agile, maybe even, there's talk about single owner unicorns.
Doing 8 figures and 9 figures in revenue, yeah.
And with AI as a co-founder.
Yeah.
Sitting right next to you.
Now there's an idea.
Yeah.
So before, if you were the sort of quintessential geeky techie guy who could write code, you just didn't know how to explain it to anybody or how to market it to anybody. And I worked with loads of their guys, by the way, in my company. Our technical team were just incredible.
Yeah.
But none of them were salespeople or marketeers. So for them to go into business, it was important for them to find a co-founder that could sell or could market. I'm not sure that's so important these days if you've got AI as your sales and marketing co-founder.
Do you remember the video that launched Dropbox? Very famous. They didn't have a product particularly, so they created a value proposition as a little tiny, you can still get it online. And it was a little animation, and it was basically a box that opened up and you put your files in. So they weren't the first on cloud or any of that type of thing. But that singular video created demand, which they then turned into investment.
Yeah.
They said, look at the people that have connected with this product. I could have done that over the weekend.
Yeah.
I could have got AI to create that little cartoon.
Yeah.
And I could have popped it up online, and I could have got 12,000 likes.
Yeah.
I could have phoned up an investor and said, if you give me £500,000, I'm going to build this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're talking about a sales and marketing co-founder. What's been really in vogue the last 5 or 6 years is getting a technical co-founder.
Yeah.
And when you think about these models like O3 and stuff like that can basically write code to a very high level that you can run into your Google Scripts hacks. And there's this agentic layer that's appearing of no-code solutions to stitch together business processes where you actually don't need a technical co-founder at all unless you're building a software product in its own. Then, so what are we really saying for entrepreneurs, for small business owners watching this, what are the big takeaways? If you're struggling with an issue in your company right now or in your department right now, you have the sentience, you have the adversarial, super smart ideator in your computer right now that can help you solve pretty much. Talk to it.
100%, Brian. Like, I think what people do is they know what they want to say in their brain, and then they don't just say it like that. They go, well, how do I structure that? So just say it the way it is in your head.
Yeah.
Literally just say it.
And just drill down for there.
There's very basic prompt engineering frameworks that you can follow. There's ones like RACE that I would use. So it's like role, assign the AI a role. You're a world-class ideator who's 20 years experience. You're an expert in your field.
You're Brian Maguire.
and you help small businesses. The action. What do I need you to do? I need you to help me with this idea I've got for a small business. It's X, Y, and Z, and I'm struggling with X, Y, and Z.
Or I'm a sales guy in a department. I'm failing,
The context, I've got a 25-year background in sales. I've not been particularly successful. I'm looking to spin it into my own business. And then what's the end result we're trying to do? What's the goal? And the goal at the end of this would be I would have amazing material to go and do a LinkedIn post.
Certain things don't go away. And I think the lesson of what we always drilled in eSpark was another one, was this concept of, taking it to your customers. So the practical element still exists. Go out and talk to customers. But now you've got something to talk to them about.
Yeah.
You can send them 4 slides and go, what do you think of it? Is this of interest to you?
Yeah.
I even think it goes beyond entrepreneurs and small businesses. I could take the same metaphor and apply it to people in the workplace. I would tell anybody, any job seekers right now, the number one hack for employment, because don't forget, the following rule has always been true. If you just know more about that thing than the dumb motherfucker you work for, you can get a job doing that thing.
Yeah.
every company I've been into, the IT people weren't genuinely legit IT people. They just knew more about computers than the guy who ran the business.
It was the guy with the arse
So they became-
hanging out the server cupboard.
So they became the IT
He was reading the Daily
director.
Record, wasn't it?
But they couldn't be the IT director for SmithKline Beecham, right? Because they're not qualified to be the IT director, but they became the IT director. I think if you're a young person right now and you're struggling to find work, there's no more important thing you can do than get your laptop out and invest time in
Familiarise
understanding these tool sets.
Yourself with the tool
And
set.
then tell your next employer or potential employer in your interview that you are competent and you're proficient in AI, and just watch the doors open like Moses parting the
Red
Sitting in
Sea.
an interview, right, and the guy goes, right, I'm going to ask you all these questions. Can I just stop you there? I know that's what you think you're looking for.
Yeah.
I think I could do this instead.
Yeah.
Yippee.
Yeah.
Because the job-seeking
Absolutely.
process is how do you stand out from obscurity, right? That's the
it.
number one
That's
problem.
the entire
Somebody's got
job-seeking
50
process.
CVs sitting on their desk. How does yours stand out?
Yeah.
Well, if you're the only guy claiming to be competent and have an intermediate to professional level understanding of AI and its practical implementation to make that business owner's company more productive, what does that do for you in terms of making you stand out in amongst the pack?
Well,
A lot.
you guys will be the same. I'm watching Sam, who's come out of university, and he doesn't have a job. I mean, he did have a job, but university jobs, and he's starting his own business. And I'm watching him, and I'm super proud, but I'm actually delighted that he's not a lawyer
Yeah.
or an accountant
Yeah.
with a profession, an optometrist even.
Yeah.
I'm just like, that has to be the answer. And as a parent, I suppose you've got to embrace that. You've got to think, well, he's got half a chance. And his great mantra, and I love his mantra personally, is like, if I fail at this, I will have so many transferable skills
Oh, yeah, for sure.
in front of an employer
100%.
or whatever. And I think that's very powerful.
Because the learning curve that he's went on and then the tooling that he's became familiar with, I mean, this is so early in the game and there's so many, I mean, I speak at these AI conferences, right? And they're very technical chats about how to build co-pilots, and it's more about the actually how do you do it type stuff than just pontificating generally on AI. And I always go through an exercise, right? So the first question I'll ask is, how many people in the room use ChatGPT this week? About 20% of the hands go up. How many people use it today? 5% of the hands go up. And how many people used it multiple times in a day in the last week? 1% of the room. Like, everybody's aware of this. Nobody is doing anything.
Yeah.
about
And
it.
we are using it hundreds of
And
times
there's
a day.
a tremendous opportunity for people. Like, there is so little that you need to do to know more about this than 99.9% of people walking the earth. If you put about 2 weeks worth of effort in, you can now genuinely say you know more about this than 99% people are walking about, and be true.
So I think that's the action point at the end of this for small business entrepreneurs and even executives and professionals is there's free tools that are available to you like Perplexity, like ChatGPT, as a starting point, is somewhere to start with. Just go in, talk to it, feed it your problem, start familiarising yourself with the tool set and learn by doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really think it is a learn by doing skill set.
Because this is a theme that we're going to continue to mine as the weeks go on, because over the last 6 weeks, we've spoke a lot about AI in terms of the deep technical aspects of it, and we're going to finish with Grok 3 in a wee second, which will probably touch a wee bit more on that as well. We've also spoke about the kind of broad societal aspects of it and what it means for society more broadly. But this is the first week that we've really got practical and went into stuff that people can listen to and go away and action immediately after they listen to this podcast. And that's a thread I want to continue pulling on, because I think that actually provides the most value for people listening.
I think custom GPTs are the gateway drug to AI adoption.
You're goddamn right they are.
So I was having this with a mate who is an executive in a company I used to work in. I was having this conversation and I was telling him that I was going to do something in the AI space. And he said, right, well, if I was a customer, I'm licensing all these tools, I've got all this stuff, but there's no adoption inside the business. And so he's like, so I'm your customer, how do you fix that? And I went, what do you value more than anything else in the whole world? And I went, don't say your gaming laptop. And he said,
My golf
kids.
clubs.
He said, my kids. And I went,
My golf clubs.
so he said it was his kids. And I went, I knew you were going to say that.
I love
And
you
go,
looking great.
Why do you value your kids so much? And why do you care about them so much? Because you fucking made them. Right? You made them. You're proud of them. When they get good feedback, you swell with pride. When somebody says something nasty about them, you want to punch them. The reason people are not adopting AI is it's almost like that journey you've been on with the custom GPT, Brian. The deeper you get into it, your mind starts just blowing up with possibility. But it's very hard at the start of the journey. This is not the type of thing you can map out on a whiteboard or an Excel spreadsheet. You've got to start writing the prompts and you get the output, and that output gives you the inspiration for the next question to ask. And you go down the rabbit hole, and by doing a ton of doing and by making something, you then become addicted and hooked on AI.
And something weird happens as well. You actually get emotionally attached to the outcome. See, every time with this thing that I'm working on, which again, I'm trying not to I'm trying to talk about it without divulging too much information, because I'm aware that competitors and people and stuff listen to this podcast. But there is similarities to, like, I think it's probably too dramatic to say raising a child, but if you invest a lot of time into something and then you see bad outputs coming for it, or you see it doing something, you're like, fuck, and you actually feel totally gutted about it. And then every time it spits out some really good work, I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. I'm so proud of you.
You want to ring your daddy and tell him and then show him and drive to Irvine and take your phone and go, look at this, Dad.
Yeah.
And he goes, what the fuck is that?
You're very short memories. I mean, I remember life before the internet. I don't know if you guys are a bit young.
100%. I was the IT guy, and my primary role was to pump the fax spooler full of telephone numbers, because before you could spam people on email, you could spam them on fax.
Yeah.
So I was the sysadmin for a Novell NetWare network, and I had a fax spooler, and my primary job was to find hundreds of thousands of fax numbers, load up the fax.
So it was you that did that?
Load up the fax spooler and hit go, and then just paper would start flying out of fax machine. Whole rainforest just decimated with me and my prolific fax spamming. Sorry, Brian, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying. The kids just have got no idea of that.
No.
There's just no comprehension of that world.
Yeah.
They could only deal with the world as they find it.
Sorry, you were going to say about before the internet.
No, I think, that it wasn't there and it is there. And that's a transition. And I do see it the same way. It's going to change the way that we do everything, but it shouldn't be too scary.
The new tools, it's the Iron Man suit, it's like, what can a normal human do and what can Tony Stark do when he straps on the Iron Man suit? And it's an enabler. It's just an enabler that 10x's, 100x's productivity and efficiency. And I think fundamentally the Iron Man suit's a great analogy. It's just a phenomenal tool that makes you superhuman.
We'll finish on that. Paddy, bring us home with Grok 3.
Okay, so as we said at the very beginning of the podcast, Grok 3 is en route in a couple of hours' time. There's not a huge amount about it known in advance, so I'll just throw out a few things that Elon had tweeted about the other night. So he is claiming that based on tests they've done, Grok 3 will be the world's most powerful AI when it comes out later on this evening. Now, in the context where just in a 2-week period, DeepSeek was the world's most powerful AI. 3 days later was supplanted by OpenAI's O3 model, which was the world's most powerful AI. Google then dropped Gemini Flask Deep Research, which for a brief moment was the world's most powerful AI. Perplexity dropped a new deep reasoning model called Sonar 2 days ago, which claims to be the world's most powerful AI.
And
Elon will drop Grok tonight and claim it to be the world's most powerful AI. That's what a fortnight looks in this AI world. Okay? You can have 5 companies leapfrogging each other in the space of 2 weeks. So he's claiming it's going to be the world's most powerful AI. I think one of the breakthroughs he's saying, there's something around about synthetic data. One of the, just an interesting anecdote from back to the AI conference, the lady from South Korea got up. She said something I hadn't even really thought about before. Most of the tokens available in the world, so most of the information that can be crawled and consumed, is written in English, and there's very, very little Korean tokens, which obviously impacts the ability and the capability of Korean AI, because tokens in and the volume of tokens in definitely equals quality output out. It's also the death of UK English, by the way, because you'll notice that AI outputs are pretty much US English at all times.
A lot of Z's and realize and
So that was a very interesting point that I hadn't really considered before. So for the non-English speaking territories, there'll be limited capability for native domestic AIs. So the way that they get around that is the AI can actually generate synthetic data to train itself on. So it turns out one of the problems we might run into is we might just run out of information in the world. There might not be enough information in the world to index. That's a general problem in AI. There's not enough tokens out there. A token just being like a 3-character word. Every single word that AI consumes breaks it up into tokens. Tokens are about 3 or 4 characters.
And Grok also has that advantage of being able to access that walled garden of billions of tweets that are getting created every day.
It's got a proprietary data set in Twitter that it's only got access to. It's trained on the biggest supercomputer, the Colossus supercomputer, which is 100,000 NVIDIA H100s.
Woo.
It took 200 million hours of GPU hours of training to train Grok 3. Which was a 10x versus what was used to train Grok 2.
Yeah. So that gives you some kind of idea of the exponential that they're, in terms of capabilities.
It's multimodal. This new training approach, largely based on synthetic data, reduces hallucinations, so it should be more accurate than other AIs. So these are all the very bold claims that are being made. And the really cool thing about AI is once you release AI into the world, new AI, the great thing is on X, there's people who've got 10, 12, 15 awesome examples within minutes.
Yeah, of all the capabilities.
So you just have to keep an eye on X for the first 24, 48 hours and you'll see, for the guys who are mad into this, how they're using it. They'll compare it to other AIs and we'll know very soon where it fits.
And Grok will have its moment in the sun, and guess what? OpenAI will have something on the shelf that they're going to release in the next couple of months as well, which will then supplant that, and on and on and on it goes.
There you have it, folks. 1 hour and 2 minutes of pure gold.
Always believe in your soul.
Singing again. Is this the bit I start to beg for likes?
In the absence of Stevie Tel Aviv, who's inevitably in London shopping for his latest pink polka dot bikini, somebody on the show has to shamelessly beg for subscribers, shares, reviews, and likes. So it may as well be me. So what we're really saying is, if you're enjoying the show and you know anybody that you can recommend it to, that's brilliant. We're trying to get the word out there as widely as we can. We're on a quest to supplant Joe Rogan and Lex Friedman as the biggest podcasters
and then
on
challenge
planet
the
Earth.
Klingons for interstellar domination of the galaxy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Good luck with your mission, gentlemen.
Once we're finished with them, we move on to Thanos. But the point remains, and the best way you can do it is to listen to us and subscribe to us on the platforms that you already get your podcast on, because we've made some progress from last week. 77% of all the downloads on episode 6 from last week have been on either Apple, Spotify, or Amazon, and a bunch of other podcasts. But importantly, it's not been on our own website. And that's great, because it means when we drop episode 7, you'll automatically get a notification and we won't have to spoon feed it to you one person at a time.
But if you can't do any of that, then you also can get us on the website as a backup at www.roundtablerethink.com. Stevie Tel Aviv, we've missed you.
Love you, mate.
We hope to get you back next week and normal services resumed. We thank Brian for his fabulous contribution and for being super sub today.
Mate. Thank you so much.
Fantastic to be here. Thank you.
And there you go. That's episode 6 in the can. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.